Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World, the Eurozone. Let's take a look at some of the top stories coming out of the region this hour. Ukraine's President Zelensky is to meet with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, France's Macron and Germany's Merz in London to review a new US-Ukraine peace plan drafted in Florida. Trump says Zelensky hasn't read the proposal yet as Western unity strains and Kiev warns its survival depends on these negotiations. At least 7 people are injured after Russian drones strike an apartment block in Ukraine's Sumy region, with 2 victims hospitalized. The border region faces near-daily attacks as the war approaches its 4th year. EU Council President Antonio Costa says Europe, quote, cannot accept any US threat to meddle in its politics after Washington's new security strategy criticizes EU policies. His comments come amid sharpening transatlantic tensions over security and political autonomy. Ukraine's president says discussions with US envoys on a new peace plan have been constructive but not easy ahead of meetings with European leaders in London and Brussels. He spoke after a call with Trump's special envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as Kiev seeks a united Western position. Bucharest elects a Liberal mayor, boosting PM Ili Bolojan's pro-European coalition and blocking a hard-right candidate who had led in the polls. The influential post, vacant since Nuksur Dan became president, had been seen as a potential hard-right breakthrough in an EU capital. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadepool says he made progress urging Beijing to ease rare earth export controls, though German firms were left out of the first new licenses. The export curbs have disrupted key industries since April amid the US-China trade war as Berlin hardens its stance ahead of a chancellor visit next year. A water leak in the Louvre's Egyptian Antiquities Department has damaged around 400 rare books, highlighting the museum's deteriorating infrastructure weeks after a high-profile jewel heist. Specialists blame old pipes and say repeated requests for funding to protect the collection have gone unmet. Iran says a European-based dual national arrested during the 12-day war with Israel has been sent to trial on charges of espionage for the Zionist regime. Officials have not named the defendant but allege he conducted intelligence cooperation with Israel while in Iran in June. Those are the headlines of the hour, and we start with our top story, the Ukraine conflict. And according to an official, territorial issues remain the biggest obstacle in peace talks to end the conflict in Ukraine. Ahead of President Volodymyr Zelensky's meetings with European allies in London, sources say Moscow is unwilling to reach an agreement without gaining territory. The official said US negotiators are pushing for a faster deal, but Ukraine is cautious. Kiev insists it cannot accept terms without carefully reviewing all details, highlighting the complexity and high stakes of the ongoing discussions. The issue of territory continues to dominate the diplomacy, even as pressure mounts from Western allies to reach a breakthrough. Joining us now is Gilbert Doctorow. He is a Russian affairs expert and he joins us live from Brussels. Gilbert, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. As the official statistics go, as of December 2025, Russia controls around 19 to 20% of Ukraine's territory. From your perspective, does that control justify Russia's territorial claims, and why or why not?
Well, the territorial claims don't exist on their own. Yes, they are indeed. The the breaking point in current talks between the Ukrainian and Russian and US sides. That is because Ukraine, with its European backers, whom it's meeting today, refuses to acknowledge that it has lost the war. The best that people can say is that it is a stalemate. In point of fact, it is not a stalemate, and the fact that only 19 or 20% of the territory of Ukraine is occupied by Russians, and that they haven't made great progress in the last 4 years of war, is that they were busy demolishing a kind of Maginot Line, an enormous defense network that was created by the Ukrainians in the 8 years of civil war from 2014 to 2022, when the Russians made their move. Accordingly, now that that defense system has been largely demolished, the gains that the Russians are making day by day are of a different order of magnitude from what we've seen in the first 3 years of this war. And it is reasonable to expect that the Russians, as Mr. Trump himself acknowledged a week ago, that the Russians will possess the whole of Donbass in a matter of a few weeks or months. Therefore, to judge the state of the war by the 19% is an irrelevancy.
Yeah, and Gilbert, you mentioned the Donbass region, which Russia seems to want to take full control of, either militarily or by forcing Ukrainian withdrawal. In your assessment, long term, can Russia sustainably govern and integrate such regions?
Well, it is doing that very well already. When you look at the first city, major city, that Russia acquired during this special military operation, that is Mariupol, it is being it's important because it is on that land bridge between the mainland of Russia and the Crimea. That is the coast, the Sea of Azov, which has as its principal point of port and industry was Mariupol. And that has been completely reconstructed, or largely reconstructed, and is on its way to normal living at European standards. Now, the whole of the Donbass will be integrated, and it is not a big issue, since the area was predominantly Russian-speaking and never had a large percentage of the population averse to Russian control. Where the Russians stop is the Dnieper River, because beyond that, west of the Dnieper River, is Ukrainian territory, in the sense that it is predominantly Ukrainian nationalist. And the Russians have no intention of occupying territory that is hostile to them. The land that they now are working on, the Donbass, is not hostile to them. And that was revealed in the referenda that were taken on their joining the Russian Federation.
Okay, Gilbert, do stay with us as we have further updates from the conflict. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is to meet with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz for high-stakes talks. The discussions will centre on the latest peace plan drafted last week during meetings between Ukrainian and US officials in Florida. Now, earlier today, Donald Trump said Zelensky's negotiators love the new proposal, but added he was a little bit disappointed that Zelensky had not yet read the full document, while Zelensky responded that he would be briefed in person, stressing that some issues can only be discussed face to face. Gilbert, let's first start on the potentials of the meeting today in London. What are your thoughts about it, and do you think there'll be any breakthrough as of the Europeans?
Well, I don't think there'll be a breakthrough. They'll have a jolly time gathering together because they're all singing from the same notes. These three, Macron, Starmer, and Merz, they are the leading supporters of Ukraine's pretensions to a fair peace treaty, which essentially means a capitulation of Russia. And that is untenable. That is not going to happen. Well, they can have a nice time together, probably share a drink, but nothing concrete will come out of this. The Ukraine's fate is being decided elsewhere. It's being decided on the field of battle, as the EU wanted, as Joseph Borrell wanted 2.5 years ago, when he said that diplomacy doesn't work and the future will be decided on the field of battle, in the assumption that the Russians will lose. Well, they didn't. They win. So that's one place. And the second place where it'll be decided is here in Brussels on the 18th and 19th of December, when the European Council meets to decide on the possible confiscation of Russian frozen state assets.
Okay, we now move on to that. We have further updates. Euroclear has issued a strong warning of the EU's plan to use frozen Russian assets. Euroclear CEO Valerie Urbain says that the idea of a reparations loan backed by these assets is completely uncharted territory. Urbain also warns that the move could create serious financial and legal stability risks for Europe. He stressed that there is no free money available from Euroclear for the European Union. According to Urbain, all frozen Russian assets are tied to ongoing and potential legal claims. This comes as EU leaders are considering using profits from the assets to support Ukraine, but Euroclear says the legal basis of the move remains highly questionable. Gilbert, of course, this is a highly contentious plan. Does Euroclear's warning validate Russia's argument that this asset seizure posed by European leaders is in fact illegal?
I think the audience deserves a bit of clarification of who Euroclear is, because it's not obvious. The financial community knows perfectly well, but the general public doesn't. I myself was in the general public category on this issue. But I can tell you right now what I've learned. Euroclear holds $42 trillion in global assets for many different depositors from around the world. 42 trillion. If its finances are compromised, there will be an unbelievable crash of all stock markets around the world. The jeopardy that we're talking about is not just a little Belgian entity. It is the whole world financial system. The credibility of Euroclear, its ability to remain neutral and not to be acting on the basis of political decisions in the European Commission, is essential to its health and to the continuing deposit of this level of money, $42 trillion, in Euroclear.
Yes, thank you very much, Gilbert Doctorow, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your information on the programme. We now move on and of course stay in Europe, and the European Council President Antonio Costa has said that while it is normal that the United States and the European Union do not share the same vision on many issues, the threat of interference in internal political life is not acceptable. Costa has stressed the vision of freedom of speech is different in the EU and in the United States. Costa also said that there cannot be freedom of speech without freedom of information, as there would be no freedom of speech if citizens and the freedom of information is sacrificed to defend the techno-oligarchs in the United States. Let's listen in to Costa's exact statements.
C'est qu'on ne peut pas accepter cette menace d'interférence dans la vie politique de l'Europe. Les États-Unis ne peuvent pas remplacer les citoyens européens pour choisir quels sont les bons partis et les mauvais partis. Les États-Unis ne peuvent pas remplacer l'Europe sur la vision qu'on a de la liberté d'expression.
Keith Vaz joins us now. He's a former British minister and he joins us live from London. Keith, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. What are your thoughts on Costa's statements here towards the United States? He could be referencing many things, but what do you think he is addressing here?
I think he is addressing the real risk of these so-called techno-oligarchs coming over and taking up much of what is actually, in terms of the way in which Europe operates, the operation of their technical services. So I think there's a real worry about this. At this moment in time, the big companies in the United States are eyeing the European Union area as a potential area where they can make a lot of money. So it's very unusual for Alberto Costa to make statements of this kind. He is actually quite low key. He leaves most of the work to Ursula von der Leyen. So the fact that he has made the statement means it's come from pressure of the way in which other countries have operated. So I think from that point of view, it should be taken very seriously. It's a warning shot, but it's quite difficult to send a warning to Donald Trump because Donald Trump holds the key on tariffs. And therefore, people are very reluctant, including Ursula von der Leyen and Alberto Costa, to challenge the United States of America, especially its president. So this is, I think, a very big deal as to what is happening, and it does need to be taken very seriously by all.
And Keith, of course, we've seen interference in, not interference per se, but vocal backing from the likes of Elon Musk for the AfD party. Of course, the Reform Party is no longer concerns the EU. But what are your thoughts on how and why Elon Musk and other tech giants from the United States are interfering in European politics in the way that they are?
Well, I'm glad you used the Musk word. I was trying to avoid using it, and I think Alberto Costa did, but because you're a journalist, you're much more able to say these words out loud without fearing any consequences. The fact is, that's exactly what they probably want to avoid, the interference in the mainstream political system that we have in the European Union and beyond of these great giants with masses of amounts of money that they can put behind political parties. Of course, it depends on the law of particular countries as to who parties get funding from. But it is very clear, as we saw in Germany, and we might see again in the United Kingdom, there are groups of people who want to influence the outcomes of the elections. And therefore, it is important that we make sure that what he says becomes a reality. It's very unusual for a European leader to speak in these terms. Very unusual. So it should be taken seriously. If I could just go back to your previous story for a second. Down the road, Macron is meeting with the president of Prime Minister of the UK and President Zelensky, and also Chancellor Merz. I think this position taken by France is quite interesting. Obviously, the French government will say this is for commercial reasons, but this is the first time France has done anything to kind of block the progress of support being given to Ukraine. And this is interesting because it may well be a significant step forward to try and get some kind of solution to the Russian-Ukraine problem. At the bottom of all this is going to be the assets of Russia. Russia wants this unfrozen as quickly as possible, and they want to deal as quickly as possible. So the discussions that are happening as we speak down the road from where I am now are going to be crucial to that happening.
Yes, Keith, indeed. And of course, we'll bring you all the updates in regards to those talks as we get them. Keith Vaz, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you here on NewsX World. Thank you very much for joining us. We now move on, and the European Union is preparing a major push to upgrade and expand its cross-border power grid, aiming to ease infrastructure bottlenecks that are wasting growing amounts of renewable energy. A draft plan shows the Commission wants a centralised EU-wide grid strategy and closer coordination with operators to accelerate long-delayed infrastructure. The lack of adequate grid investment has pushed up energy prices, with wind and solar output increasingly curtailed to avoid overloading outdated networks. Without urgent action, the EU could be forced to curtail as much as 310 terawatt hours of renewable generation in 2040. That's nearly half of what EU households consumed last year. To speed up construction, another draft proposal would exempt many grid projects from environmental impacts assessments and remove permit requirements for small renewable and storage installations. Authorities would face strict deadlines, including a 6-month limit for approving EV charging stations with automatic approval if they fail to respond. Now we move over to France, and a water leak last month has damaged hundreds of books in the Egyptian Antiquities Department of the Louvre Museum, highlighting growing concerns over the museum's ageing infrastructure. According to art industry reports, roughly 300 to 400 works were affected after water from deteriorating pipes seeped into one of the department's library rooms. Museum officials acknowledged that the problem had been known for years, with repairs not scheduled until September 2026. While the affected volumes were those routinely consulted by Egyptologists, officials emphasised that no irreplaceable or precious manuscripts were indeed lost. The incident comes just weeks after a $102 million jewel heist exposed major security vulnerabilities and follows a partial gallery closure in November due to structural weaknesses. A recent report by France's Public Audit Office, the Cour des Comptes, warns that the Louvre's struggle to modernise its facilities has been worsened by heavy spending on acquisitions, raising broader questions about the preservation and safety of the world's most visited museum. And with that, it's a wrap on NewsX World. The Eurozone